The glass doors of the dealership slid open with a soft hiss, letting in a rush of cool, conditioned air that smelled faintly of leather and new tires. Jamal stepped inside, his sneakers squeaking on the polished floor, his backpack slung over one shoulder, and his eyes wide with a mix of awe and nervousness. He'd never been in a place like this before, where the cars gleamed like jewels under the showroom lights, and the salespeople wore suits that looked more expensive than anything in his closet. He tried to steady his breath, reminding himself that he had every right to be here, that he was just looking, just curious, just a kid who loved cars. But as he wandered between the rows of luxury vehicles, tracing the lines of a cherry-red sports car with his eyes, he could feel the stares. The sales staff, clustered near the reception desk, watched him with thinly veiled suspicion, their conversations pausing as he passed. One of them, a woman with sharp features and a tighter bun than her smile, broke away from the group and approached him, her heels clicking like a metronome of disapproval. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone clipped, her eyes scanning him up and down as if searching for a reason to call security. Jamal swallowed, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm just looking, ma'am. I really like cars." She arched an eyebrow, glancing at his hoodie and faded jeans. "These aren't toys, you know. They're very expensive. Maybe you should come back with your parents." Jamal felt his cheeks burn, but he forced himself to nod politely. "I know. I just want to see them up close." The woman's lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, we're very busy today. If you're not here to buy, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We can't have people loitering." The word stung, loitering, as if he was a problem, not a person. Jamal looked around, noticing how the other customers, all adults, all dressed in business casual or better, seemed to blend into the background, their presence unquestioned. He wanted to protest, to explain that he wasn't causing trouble, that he just loved cars, that he dreamed of owning one someday. But the words caught in his throat. Instead, he nodded again, his voice barely above a whisper. "Okay, sorry." He turned to leave, feeling the weight of every eye in the room on his back, the humiliation settling over him like a heavy coat. As he stepped outside, the sun felt too bright, the world too loud. He walked down the sidewalk, his head bowed, replaying the scene in his mind. He wondered if he should have said something, stood up for himself, demanded to be treated with respect. But he was just a kid, and she was an adult, and the rules of the world felt too big to fight. He made his way home, the city blurring past him, his thoughts a jumble of anger and sadness. When he reached his apartment, his mother was waiting, her eyes lighting up as he walked in. "Hey, baby, how was your day?" she asked, her voice warm and steady, the kind of voice that made the world feel safe. Jamal hesitated, not wanting to worry her, but the story spilled out anyway. The dealership, the cars, the woman, the way he'd been made to feel small. His mother listened, her expression shifting from concern to something sharper, a quiet fury simmering beneath her calm exterior. She hugged him tight, whispering, "You did nothing wrong. Don't ever let anyone make you feel less than you are." That night, Jamal lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day over and over. He thought about the cars, the way they shone under the lights, the way he'd felt like he didn't belong. He wondered if things would ever be different, if people would ever see him for who he was, not just what they expected. The next morning, the city was buzzing with the usual weekday energy, but in Jamal's apartment, there was a quiet sense of purpose. His mother dressed in her favorite suit, the one she wore for important meetings, her hair pulled back, her eyes focused. She made a few phone calls, her voice low and firm, and then she turned to Jamal with a smile that was both reassuring and mischievous. "Come on, let's go for a drive," she said. Jamal followed her downstairs, his curiosity piqued. Waiting at the curb was a car he'd only ever seen in magazines, a gleaming black Rolls-Royce, its paint so glossy it reflected the sky. The driver, dressed in a crisp uniform, opened the door for them with a respectful nod. Jamal slid into the back seat, the leather soft and cool beneath him, the world outside suddenly distant and unreal. As they pulled away from the curb, his mother squeezed his hand. "Sometimes, people need to be reminded who they're dealing with," she said, her tone light, but her eyes serious. The drive to the dealership was quiet. the city unfolding around them in a blur of color and motion. When they arrived, the Rolls-Royce glided to a stop in front of the glass doors, its presence impossible to ignore. The sales staff inside turned, their faces a mix of surprise and confusion, as Jamal and his mother stepped out. The woman from the day before was there, her posture stiffening as she recognized Jamal. His mother walked in first, her heels clicking with confidence, her gaze sweeping the room. "Good morning," she said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made people listen. "I believe you met my son yesterday." The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to cut. Jamal stood a little taller, his mother's presence a shield against the stares and whispers. The woman's face paled, her eyes darting between Jamal and his mother, realization dawning. I'm sorry, I didn't realize," she stammered, but Jamal's mother held up a hand, silencing her. "You didn't realize because you didn't bother to ask. You saw a young black boy and assumed he didn't belong. That's not just bad business, it's bad humanity." The words hung in the air, sharp and clear, impossible to ignore. Jamal watched as the staff shifted uncomfortably, some looking away, others meeting his gaze with something like shame. His mother turned to him, her smile softening. "Jamal, would you like to look at the cars now?" For the first time, Jamal felt the room open up, the barriers falling away. He nodded, his heart pounding with a mix of pride and relief. As he walked between the rows of cars, his mother by his side, he felt seen, not just as a customer, but as a person. The staff hovered nearby, their attitudes transformed, offering information and answering questions with newfound respect. Jamal's mother listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions, her interest genuine. When they reached the car Jamal had admired the day before, she turned to the saleswoman. "We'll take this one," she said simply, her tone leaving no room for doubt. The woman nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she began the paperwork. Jamal watched, a smile spreading across his face, the memory of yesterday's humiliation fading in the light of this new day. He realized that sometimes the best revenge wasn't anger or confrontation. It was dignity, confidence, and the quiet power of being seen for who you truly are. The dealership, once a fortress of glass and chrome that had seemed so unwelcoming, now felt transformed by the presence of Jamal and his mother. The staff, who had yesterday watched him with suspicion, now moved with a nervous energy, eager to please, their voices softer, their smiles more practiced. Jamal could sense the shift, the way people's attitudes changed when they realized who his mother was, or more precisely, what she represented, a level of wealth and influence that demanded respect. But beneath the surface, he also sensed something else, a discomfort, a recognition that yesterday's assumptions had been exposed, that the easy judgments they'd made about him had been not only wrong, but costly. As his mother finalized the paperwork, Jamal wandered the showroom, his steps more confident now, his eyes lingering on the cars he'd only dreamed of. He paused by a silver coupe, running his fingers lightly over the smooth curve of the hood, imagining what it would feel like to drive it down an open road, the wind in his hair, the world wide open before him. One of the younger salesmen approached, his expression apologetic. "Hey, I just want to say, I'm sorry about yesterday. We should have treated you better." Jamal looked at him, searching for sincerity, and found it in the man's eyes. He nodded, accepting the apology, but also knowing that words were only the beginning. "It's okay," he said quietly. "Just don't do it to the next kid who walks in." The salesman nodded, his face thoughtful, as if the lesson had finally landed. Meanwhile, Jamal's mother was deep in conversation with the dealership manager, a man who had been conspicuously absent the day before, but now hovered nearby, eager to make amends. She spoke with the calm authority of someone used to being listened to, her words measured but firm. "You have a responsibility," she said, her voice carrying across the showroom. "Not just to your customers, but to your community. The way you treat people matters. My son could have been anyone's child. He deserves respect, just like anyone else." The manager nodded, his face flushed, promising to review their policies, to provide better training, to ensure that what happened to Jamal would not happen again. Jamal watched the exchange, feeling a strange mix of pride and sadness. He was proud of his mother, of her strength and her refusal to let injustice slide by unchallenged. But he was also sad that it had taken her wealth and status to force the dealership to see him, to treat him with the dignity he deserved. He wondered how many other kids had been turned away, how many dreams had been quietly crushed by a careless word or a dismissive glance. As the sale was finalized, the staff gathered to congratulate Jamal and his mother, their smiles now genuine, their congratulations heartfelt. The car he had admired was his, a symbol not just of luxury, but of perseverance, of the power of standing up for oneself. As they prepared to leave, the woman who had kicked Jamal out the day before approached, her face pale, her hands twisting nervously. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I shouldn't have judged you. I hope you can forgive me." Jamal looked at her, remembering the sting of her words, the way she had made him feel small. He took a deep breath, searching for the right response. "I forgive you," he said finally, his voice steady. "But I hope you remember this the next time you see someone who doesn't look like they belong." The woman nodded, tears glistening in her eyes, and Jamal felt a weight lift from his shoulders. As he and his mother drove away in their new car, the city unfolding before them, Jamal felt a sense of possibility he hadn't known before. He realized that the world was full of people who would try to define him, to put him in a box, to tell him where he did and didn't belong. But he also realized that he had the power to define himself, to claim his place in the world, to demand respect not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel less than they were. That night, as they celebrated with a quiet dinner at home, Jamal's mother raised a glass to him. "To you, Jamal," she said, her eyes shining with pride, "for never letting anyone tell you who you are." Jamal smiled, feeling the truth of her words settle deep inside him. He knew the road ahead would not always be easy, that there would be other challenges, other moments when he would have to stand tall in the face of doubt. But he also knew that he was not alone, that he carried with him the strength of his family, the lessons of the past, and the unshakable belief that he belonged everywhere. As he drifted off to sleep that night, Jamal dreamed not of cars or showrooms, but of open roads and endless horizons, of a world where every child could walk through any door and be seen for who they truly were. The next morning, sunlight streamed through Jamal's window, painting golden stripes across his comforter and waking him with a sense of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. The events of the previous day replayed in his mind. But this time, the sting of humiliation was softened by the memory of his mother's strength and the way the dealership staff had been forced to confront their own biases. As he got ready for school, Jamal felt a new confidence in his step, a quiet assurance that he could face whatever the world threw at him. At breakfast, his mother smiled at him over her coffee, her eyes warm and proud. "You know, Jamal, what happened yesterday wasn't just about a car. It was about standing up for yourself, and for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. I hope you never forget that." Jamal nodded, the lesson settling deep in his heart. At school, word of what happened at the dealership had already begun to spread. Some of his classmates had seen the Rolls-Royce pull up, and rumors swirled about Jamal's mystery car and his famous mom. A few kids approached him in the hallway, their curiosity genuine, their questions hesitant. "Is it true your mom bought you a car?" one asked, eyes wide with amazement. Jamal grinned, shaking his head. "It's not mine, it's hers. But she let me help pick it out." The other kids laughed, the tension easing, and for the first time, Jamal felt like he was being seen for who he was, not just for what people assumed. Later that day, his social studies teacher, Ms. Carter, pulled him aside after class. "I heard about what happened, Jamal. I just want you to know, I'm proud of you. It takes courage to face that kind of treatment and respond with dignity." Jamal thanked her, feeling a surge of gratitude for the adults in his life who saw his potential, who encouraged him to rise above the negativity. As the week went on, the story of the dealership encounter continued to ripple through the community. Some parents called the school to express their support, while others reached out to Jamal's mother, thanking her for speaking up. The dealership itself issued a public apology, promising to implement new training for its staff and to work with local organizations to promote diversity and inclusion. The manager even invited Jamal and his mother to speak at a company meeting, hoping their story would inspire real change. At first, Jamal was nervous about the idea of standing in front of a room full of adults, But his mother encouraged him. "Your voice matters, Jamal. People need to hear your story." On the day of the meeting, Jamal wore his favorite shirt and stood beside his mother as she addressed the staff. She spoke about the importance of empathy, of seeing people as individuals rather than stereotypes, and of the power of second chances. When it was Jamal's turn, he took a deep breath and shared his experience. Not just the pain of being judged, but the hope that things could be different. "I just wanted to look at the cars," he said, his voice steady. "I didn't want trouble. I just wanted to be treated like everyone else." The room was silent as he spoke, the weight of his words settling over the staff. When he finished, the manager thanked him, promising that the dealership would do better. As they left, several employees approached Jamal, shaking his hand and thanking him for his honesty. The experience left Jamal feeling empowered, his confidence growing with each step he took. He realized that his story had the power to change minds, to open hearts, to make the world a little more welcoming for the next kid who walked through those doors. At home that evening, Jamal and his mother reflected on the journey they had taken together. "You know," his mother said, "sometimes the hardest moments are the ones that teach us the most. I'm proud of you, Jamal, not just for what you did, but for who you are." Jamal smiled, feeling the truth of her words. He knew there would be other challenges ahead, other moments when he would have to stand up for himself and for others. But he also knew that he was ready, that he had the strength and the support to face whatever came his way. As he drifted off to sleep that night, Jamal dreamed of a world where every child was welcomed, where every door was open, and where respect was given freely, not earned through wealth or status. He knew that world was possible, and he was determined to help build it, one story at a time. As spring turned to summer, the story of Jamal and the dealership became more than just a local incident. It became a quiet catalyst for change in the community. The dealership, true to its word, began hosting workshops on diversity and inclusion, inviting not only its own staff, but also employees from neighboring businesses. Jamal and his mother were asked to return, not as customers this time, but as honored guests and speakers. The first time Jamal stood in front of a room full of adults, he felt the old nerves flutter in his stomach, but he remembered his mother's words and the support of his teachers and friends. He spoke honestly about what it felt like to be judged before being known, about the sting of exclusion and the power of being seen. His mother followed, her voice steady and warm, reminding everyone that real change starts with small acts of courage and kindness. The impact was immediate. Employees who had once looked through Jamal now greeted him by name. The saleswoman who had kicked him out approached him after one session, her eyes sincere. "I want you to know, I've thought about that day every single morning. I'm working to be better, not just here, but everywhere." Jamal nodded, accepting her words, understanding that growth was a journey, not a destination. The dealership's new approach began to ripple outward. Other businesses took notice, and soon a coalition of local shops and restaurants joined together to create a Welcome All initiative, pledging to treat every customer with dignity and respect, regardless of appearance. Jamal's story was featured in the local newspaper and then picked up by a regional news station. The headline read, "From Exclusion to Empowerment, How One Boy and His Mother Changed a Community." Jamal's classmates, who had once only whispered about the Rolls-Royce, now saw him as a leader, someone who had turned a moment of pain into a movement for good. He was invited to join the student council, where he worked to make sure every student's voice was heard. At home, life settled into a new rhythm. Jamal and his mother still laughed about the day the Rolls-Royce pulled up to the dealership, but now it was a story of triumph, not humiliation. They talked about the future, about college and careers, about the kind of world Jamal wanted to help create. His mother reminded him that their journey was part of a much larger story, one that stretched back through generations of people who had fought for dignity and justice. "You stand on their shoulders, Jamal," she said one evening as they watched the sunset from their balcony.